A lot of people have been royally disappointed by the Cybertruck specifications now that we know, hey, actually the Founders series starts at, $100,000 and goes up past $120,000. And I was trying to warn people for quite some time, just like looking at the energy density of the 4680 cells and looking at the market as a whole and how high the demand is for the Cybertruck. I just kept trying to remind everybody there was no way these things were going to be anywhere close to their originally announced pricing, and now people are just dogging on it left and right. They will look for any reason, any excuse to hate on the Cybertruck. Literally just a guy with poor tires and not much knowledge on how to go off-roading in the snow gets a little bit stuck for a few seconds and people go, oh my god, the Cybertruck now sucks. When in reality, I think there's a bigger issue that keeps happening with Tesla, and it all comes down to expectations. I was actually very impressed with the Cybertruck specs once they were dropped on the website. The event itself was disappointing. There was no way around that. It was so poorly planned, it was terribly lit, and they didn't talk enough about the truck, so much so that we found the most interesting information about the Cybertruck through YouTubers on their own personal channels, which were showcasing all of the advantages and changes with steer-by-wire and how the software is so much better. The YouTubers should not be posting all of the coolest Cybertruck content. I feel like Tesla should be doing that. The big reason I think most people are disappointed was the expectation. The problem is the narrative everybody has on Twitter, and I've seen in YouTube comments too, is everyone saying, well, this is twice the price, or this is $40,000 more than what Tesla said it was going to be, or I thought we were going to get a 500-mile range and we ended up getting, a little over 300. All of this comes down to that event, that horrible, wicked, no good, rotten Cybertruck event we had all the way back in 2019, where there was no pandemic, the sky was the limit, Tesla was growing, Model Y deliveries were right around the corner, and that Cybertruck event, everyone just lost their minds and got all hyped up around the design and the specs, and we were obsessed with those numbers, even though Tesla pulled down that event right away, and about a year later pulled all of those prices and specs off of the website and basically was renouncing the Cybertruck. They were kind of like, we don't want to talk about that, we don't want to talk about that, we're gonna save all the final production specs for later. And because everybody saw that event and kept holding Tesla to those prices and to those range figures, that's why they were all upset when the launch edition came out and nothing was really that accurate. The towing capacity was worse, the payload capacity was worse, and the range wasn't as good for the tri-motor. The price was definitely nowhere near close, but this all comes down to the expectation. If we could all just imagine for a second and put on our pretend caps, visualize for a minute if Tesla didn't reveal all of those specs at the Cybertruck event. What if back in 2019 it was merely a concept vehicle? They showed off the design and they talk about some of the advantages of it being stainless steel and bulletproof and durable, but let's say they didn't throw the steel ball and shatter the glass, and they also said, we haven't decided yet on pricing and range figures, that's all subject to change, so we don't want to get your hopes up, but this is the overall design. And we could all just be heated about the decision to make the Cybertruck such a weird looking vehicle, and some people love it and some people hate it, but we all just had to wait and see for the price and range, and I bet there would have been a lot more speculation on what this vehicle's gonna cost. If Elon could just keep his mouth shut, then we likely wouldn't have been as disappointed as we are right now, because I think if we would have heard more earlier about this is a very large tank-like vehicle that's super strong, super durable, and it's gonna have a higher voltage architecture with super fast charging, then a lot of us would have assumed, okay, this is Tesla's best product, and if it's better than anything else they've ever made, why wouldn't it be more expensive than everything else they've made? Again, this comes down to expectations. Tesla is not very good at setting them in the first place, and particularly Elon, who kind of was running the event, and based on what their head of engineering Lars has said, it sounded like they didn't have much time to throw that prototype together. About 90 days to get a working Cybertruck prototype that they could drive on stage and talk about their aspirational specifications. And I think it's because Elon's an incredibly optimistic, sometimes to a fault, visionary that is just convinced, yeah, we have to do it in this amount of time and for this price, and he sets really, really ambitious timelines both on the engineering team and the software team, oftentimes that they can't quite deliver on. And sure, you can make that argument that, well, Elon pushes people and they may not necessarily deliver on time, or they may not deliver a product as good as he originally thought, but they would have achieved a much worse product if they were not pushed to their limits. Elon is always pushing people to come up with the best possible solutions, and that's how we're able to get such incredible products, are from his unrealistic expectations. And there's probably a lot of truth to that argument, but I think that the important thing to remember moving forward, whether it's a robo-taxi timeline, a full self-driving timeline, when is V12 coming out, when is Smart Summon going to be available for people who don't have ultrasonic sensors, when is the Tesla Semi going to ramp. If you preface all of these announced timelines and all of these claims Elon makes with, well, keep in mind, he's way too optimistic, he's way too aggressive with what can be achieved and at what price, and you understand that Elon is oftentimes pushing that narrative on earnings calls and on Twitter that things that can't be achieved can be achieved. If you look at everything with that expectation, you won't be as disappointed by the reality of what actually comes out. That's basically where I put myself on the Cybertruck expectations. I was like, Elon overpromises sometimes and underdelivers, and that's why we shouldn't expect the Cybertruck to necessarily check all the boxes we want. And just because Elon made a tweet about the F-150 Lightning not being affordable, that does not necessarily mean that the Cybertruck has to undercut the Lightning. A lot of sentences these days are starting with, but Elon said, and I find that that usually doesn't go all that well. In the same way, I think we should all stop calling the next generation vehicle platform the $25,000 Tesla for the same reason I wouldn't call it the $39,000 Cybertruck. That obviously didn't end up happening, and the expectations I think are way out of whack because Elon said in the past, through those same style events that we saw back in 2019 and 2020, oh yeah, eventually we're gonna make a car that costs $25,000, it'll be super affordable. Yeah, he also said 1 million robotaxis by 2020. He also said Cybertruck would start at $40,000. Obviously, that didn't end up happening. Maybe there will be a variant in the future after 4 or 5 years of production, and with the right incentives, factor in some inflation, we might see the Cybertruck hit that price, but definitely not at launch. And I think we should have that same expectation for the next generation vehicle platform. And while I really get annoyed with how much Elon overpromises and how many times he said full self-driving, feature complete, end of this year or end of next year, he said that so many times and I get very, very tired of it, but I gotta give the guy credit. If he had a more cynical, realistic view of the world like the rest of us do, and we had a more doubtful impression of all of the specs and price and range figures that he gave, if he was more like the rest of us, he wouldn't be attempting the things he's attempting. He would have listened to the people who said, Elon, starting up a brand new electric car company in the middle of the recession, that's a horrible idea and it's probably not going to work, or you definitely should not try to make your own private rocket company that's never succeeded. There's no way that could be a success. He would listen to those people because they all had history and evidence proving that those were horrible ideas. So Elon's kind of thick ego and arrogance towards a lot of people saying, no, Elon, you can't do that, or no, Elon, that's not going to be possible, that's what has enabled a lot of what he's achieved to become possible. He has to kind of push down all of the naysayers and push against people saying, Elon, I don't think that's possible. That's kind of how he's got to where he is today. So I can't necessarily even fault him for being so overly optimistic and trying to achieve things that no one else has said is possible. Now, the important difference of context here between a hyperbole and more of a realistic investor is that yes, Elon's way too optimistic on things, sometimes to a fault, and that means that a lot of the claims he makes or a lot of the promises he makes aren't necessarily going to be delivered, and that's okay. Like, amazing things can still be achieved, and that's kind of the point I wanted to get across in today's video. The Cybertruck, despite all of our expectations for it being super cheap and having super high range, is still an incredible vehicle. Even the Founders series. The fact that there's a vehicle you can buy that's in production right now that is literally bulletproof to many handguns, that can fast charge up to 350 kilowatts at V4 superchargers, that has rear wheel steering thanks to steer-by-wire, an amazing turning radius, an updated 48-volt architecture with this giant 18.5-inch gorgeous display, ventilated seats in the front, this giant windshield, amazing off-roading capability, and a powertrain that can do 0 to 60 in 2.6 seconds. This is just an amazing feat of engineering, and it's Tesla's first pickup. You can literally stand on that vault cover, and sure, it doesn't have the tailgate ramp, it doesn't have the over 500-mile range, but if you looked at those old original specs they gave in 2019 as aspirational and obviously assumed that Elon was pushing the engineering team and was being way too optimistic, then you understood most of those specs were not going to be very achievable anyway. The blind kind of sheep mentality to have towards Elon is because he's achieved some of the things he set out to do, that means anything he ever says he will do will happen, and some people have that don't bet against Elon Musk mentality. I'm definitely not saying you should bet against him, but I also think there's a happy middle ground that says I don't believe Elon will achieve everything he says he can, but I also think that there's some advantages and there's some incredible accomplishments that can come out of those overly aggressive timelines or those super high aspirational goals. Cybertruck didn't get the 3,500 pound payload capacity, but it did get 2,500, which compared to all other electric trucks on the market, that's class leading. Like, no one else can touch that when it comes to the Rivian or the Lightning. And okay, we didn't get our 500 plus mile range, but is anyone else getting a 340 mile range with a 123 kilowatt hour battery pack? Much smaller battery pack than every other electric truck on the market, and despite being much larger than the Rivian R1T, is still able to achieve comparable range. And while still being bulletproof and having all of these additional features, it still weighs less than a typical Rivian R1T. That's an incredible vehicle that I still think deserves a huge round of applause, and I just hope that Elon, at least with his public statements, could be a little bit more realistic with the expectations, because I don't like this narrative that, well, because Elon said it would be one thing and it ended up being a little bit less of that thing, therefore it's a disappointment. Therefore, they didn't live up to the hype, they didn't exceed the expectations. And I don't like when there's this incredible vehicle that has all of these great features and all of these amazing capabilities, and the narrative surrounding it is, yeah, but it should have been better because it wasn't as good as Elon said it was going to be. Yeah, that kind of downplays the accomplishment that is getting an insanely complicated and an insanely impressive vehicle out on the market, with what Tesla's claiming over 100,000 installed capacity at Giga Texas for a very intricate, complex vehicle. Ford has already cut production estimates for the F-150 Lightning by half for 2024, and they're only targeting 80,000 units for the year, which actually means, despite the F-150 Lightning coming out much earlier, the Cybertruck might actually outproduce the F-150 Lightning within its first year of production. That says a lot about how well engineered the Cybertruck is, not just as a product for end consumers, but also the manufacturing process was much more well thought out. And as Elon always doubles down on, the factory line and the assembly process is far more complicated and arguably far more important than the design of the vehicle itself, because you could design a really, really cool truck with a lot of bells and whistles like the Hummer EV, but if you can't scale it and you can't turn a profit on it, then it really doesn't put that big of a dent in our transition to electric vehicles. So I don't want to take away from the accomplishment that is the Cybertruck, and I just hope more people moving forward after all of this disappointment can have a more realistic view of what Elon time and what Elon's goals and aspirations are. Just because they had a presentation a few years ago that said there's a $25,000 car coming, that doesn't mean that the launch price is going to be 25 grand. And it may not have all of the amazing bells and whistles that you're looking for, but just look at it at face value, how it compares to everything else on the market. Don't try to compare everything to what Elon said it would be, because then you're just always going to be disappointed, or worse, you're going to be constantly changing your opinion to fit whatever Elon's current narrative is, and that's even weirder. I watched a bunch of people very quickly go from, no, the Cybertruck's going to weigh 5,000 pounds, it's going to go over 500 miles on a charge, and it's going to cost $40,000. Elon never lies, don't bet against Elon. And then it finally comes out and it's not any of those things, and then you go, well, actually none of those things were important anyway. You don't need to go over 500 miles, and $40,000 with inflation is actually $120,000. Yeah, you people look really ridiculous. Don't do that. But what do you guys think of the Cybertruck? Are you still disappointed, or are you happy with the current day specs and you're just gonna wait until the price comes down until it makes sense for you? All that good stuff. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and thank you to everybody supporting this channel directly. Seriously, helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos. So thanks again, and have an excellent rest of your day.